that's all. Before that, no forest play. Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast. The Europa League squad has been revealed, and the fallout, the meltdown, the confusion and the apathy from the fan base is there for all to see. Feels like we need to get a few things off our chest and have a damn good hour's chat about it all. With so many conspiracy theories, the infighting is rife. Can't we just all get along and look forward to our first European campaign in decades? It's never a dull moment at Forest. And so, here with me, Greg Oram, your host. To plough through it, we have Paul Morley and Danscape. I love that music. I feel like I needed a little bit of a lift, and I thought, you know what? Any excuse to get the Europa music, not the conference music that we touched a little bit on when we didn't know where we were going to be, but the Europa League music anthem needs to be played because we are in the Europa League and it should be something to be celebrated, and we have to be positive, and we're going to be happy clappers, everybody. That's what we're going to be. No, seriously, in all honesty, you know that this is the place where you will get honest opinion. You will get me saying how I see it, and these guys and all the other contributors as well. We want you guys in the comments to let us know what you think about the Europa squad, because it has been something over the last 12 to 15 hours or whatever it may be that's kind of really splitting the fan base a little bit in terms of people see it one way and others see it another way. Is Nuno at play with some tricks and games and so on? But no, we're gonna have a chat about it all and put our perspective forward. No Richard this morning, which I'm really sad about. Last night, we were texting each other saying, I think we need a pod. We should do a pod. And then I woke up this morning and he's realised and remembered that he's got a meeting to go to. So he's still probably just getting himself into work over in Oklahoma. So no Richard Spray, which I'm really sad about. But we have got Danscape with us. How you doing, buddy? You okay?
Yeah, good. I booked some flights last night for one of these European trips. So I'm feeling good about it, regardless of the squad.
Where you going?
So the Braga one, booked some flights to Lisbon and then up to Porto and then back from Porto after the game, basically. So making a bit of a week of it. Looking forward to that in January. Get away from the miserable weather over here, hopefully.
Oh, the Braga one is the one that I've got my eye on still. I've got a few things to get past before I can start booking flights. I've only just got back to the UK and all the rest of it. But Paul Morley's with us, and I know you've booked your flights. You were one of the first, as I expected, straight out of the blocks. You're off to Europe to follow Forest. How are you feeling today, Paul?
Good, yeah. I mean, what a brilliant thing for us all to be falling out about. You know, the fact that we're in the Europa League and we're talking about Europa League squad. I mean, if you think back 12 months and someone had said we'd be having this argument / conversation, we'd have all snapped your hands off. So yeah, I think we shouldn't lose sight of that, as you said. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this time in 3 weeks' time. I shall be waking up in Seville, hopefully after seeing a good result against Betis, and then in December, I'm off to Utrecht for just for one flying visit for the night in Utrecht to be there for that game. Braga is also something I've got my eye on, but like you say, there's a few hurdles to overcome domestically first before I can look at that one. So yeah, we'll see how that one goes. Watch this space.
Yeah, domestic hurdles. I know exactly what you're talking about. Raf is in the comments. Hello, buddy. How you doing? As is Brucey over in Texas. Good morning to you. Jay says, afternoon, guys. Do we think Nuno is starting to lose the fans? Well, that is a question, Jay, that we will be looking at in the podcast. Stick around. The wonderful Steph over in the US says that she's really looking forward to our collective perspective. Steph, you're a great supporter of the podcast, and you made a donation onto YouTube. I think it was yesterday. Want to thank you for that. It's really appreciated. You didn't have to do that, but we are grateful. Thank you so much. Big Arn, what a lad. He says, work, yes, it does get in the way of a good Forest chat, unfortunately. We'll do our best to move the work to one side for a moment. And Pat Brett says, look, no left-back cover, plus Dominguez inclusion seems strange to me. Yeah, that's on the menu, Pat. It's coming up. And a good friend of Talking Reds, Holly Royal, host of the Forest Women Fancast. She says, morning, guys. Make this madness make sense. It is a bit mad. And Holly, we've got, but you have in particular, when I think of the women's game and the Forest women, they start on a Sunday. So I know your focus will be on that as well. So lots to look forward to for the women coming up as well. Jackie Howarth, I want to say hello to you. She says lots of brownie points to be earned first. Yeah, I think you're talking, Brownie, about us men, or anybody, in fact, trying to make sure those domestic issues are overcome. Right. Okay. The squad has been announced. Everyone knows what it is, but I'll whack it up onto the screen. So for those of you that have been living under the rock for the last 14 hours, it's a 22-man squad, and I'm going to turn to Paul in a moment to explain why it's 22 and not 25. I'm sure most of you do know that, but for those of you that want it clarifying, Paul is our in-house expert, I think, on those kind of things. But the 22 names are goalkeepers Sells and John Victor. Across the defence, fullback cover looks like this with Nico Williams and Ola Aina and Nicola Savona. 4 centre-backs in the form of Murillo Milenkovic and Marato Bolli. In the midfield, we're going with Anderson, Douglas Luiz, Dominguez, Sangare and Ryan Yates. In the cam role, Gibbs, White and McAtee. Wing options include Bakwa, Callum Hudson-Odoi and Dan Ndoye. And 3 forwards of Wood, Cali Muendo and Igor Jesus. Okay, there's under 21s that fall onto a B list. There's an A list, a B list. Sounds like a celebrity thing going on with all these lists all around. Paul Morley, can you shed some light on it for us, please?
I'll try my best. Yeah. So yeah, as you say, there's 2 squads essentially, or 2 lists, as you point out, that each teams can register for the Europa League. There is a list A and a list B. Maybe easy to tackle the list B first, and that covers homegrown players that are under 21. So the 2 obvious ones who will be, in addition to that graphic you just showed on the screen there, who will be actively in the squad, if you like, will be Zach Abbott, a centre-back or potentially full-back, and Aaron Bott as a third goalkeeper. So then you move to the main A list of 25, which is obviously senior players. And there needs to be, or the request is that in order to fulfill your quota of 25, you must name 4 locally grown, homegrown players, effectively academy products that are now part of the senior squad. So as we know, we only have one of those, which is Ryan Yates. So therefore, we essentially lose 3 spots. So you take 25, take the 4 off for the homegrown players, add Yates back in as 1, that makes 22. So that means aside from Yates, you've got to name 21 other senior players in the squad. Just a word on Jacques Cunha. He's obviously under 21 for Premier League purposes, but for Europa League purposes, he doesn't qualify for the B list because he's not a homegrown under 21 player. So he becomes part of the selection process for the remaining 22 players, or 21 after Yates. So that's pretty much where we are. And then obviously there's the decisions that need to be made around that. I mean, I think we're all kind of acknowledged that of the senior players in the squad, there's a few that we're actively seeking loans for, or that are actively seeking loans for themselves. So Taiwo and Jota, for example, which is understandable why they've not been named in it. And then it gets a little bit, I guess, trickier. Probably another obvious one is the third goalkeeper, because Aaron Bott can perform that role from the B list. Then obviously Angus Gunn as the de facto third goalkeeper, he's not included either. And then you come down to some of the more, I guess, difficult decisions, which I'm sure we'll talk around. So obviously there's Dominguez with his fitness. There is obviously the decision that's been made about Hutchinson. And there is obviously the Zinchenko situation as well. And as we said before, Jacques Cunha hasn't made it and doesn't qualify for the B list either. So, without stealing your thunder about introducing the contentious stuff, that's the sort of background to it, and it's why we've got to where we've got to effectively.
No, not at all. No, thank you very much. I just want to go over that again, just to underline then that the big news that kind of came out an hour or so, or a couple of hours before the squad was officially announced. Tom Colomosi of the Daily Mail revealed that he had inside knowledge that Amari Hutchinson was going to be left out, and that started to cause a little bit of a rumble. So when the squad was announced officially, it was confirmed that Hutchinson is out, Alexander Zinchenko is out, Jer Cunha is out, and he's out because of the reasons Paul just outlaid. He can't be an under 21 on the B list. We know that Jota Silva and Taiwo are now surplus to requirements, so them being left out was a foregone conclusion and not a surprise. And actually, you know, I kind of almost don't count them. And you must name at least 2 goalkeepers. And as Paul rightly pointed out, having Aaron Bott on the list, on B list, means that Gunn misses out, and that feels about right to me. So, okay, lots of upset, it seems, Danscape, with, you know, Forest fans getting upset because they're talking about Amari Hutchinson, and that's where we'll start here. He's our record signing at £37.5 million, and the upset seems to be is how can you leave your record signing out? No, he must be in. Where are you on Amari Hutchinson and him being left out? Does it make any sense to you? Does the fee matter? Does it even come into it?
It doesn't come into it in terms of choosing your best squad for a competition, does it? I would not like my manager to feel like he has to pick a player based on his price tag, and that kind of pressure to be on there if he genuinely doesn't think that, you know, that's the best option to go with. So I'm fine with that side of it. I think there is a lot of competition on that right-hand side if that's where we see Amari Hutchinson playing. There is a lot of cover that we can bring in for that position. Obviously, we've seen Dan and Doy is the kind of preferred choice at the minute. Bakwa is going to be competing for that exact same position. McAtee's been played there. Cali Muendo can play over there. Callum Hudson-Odoi can play on the right-hand side if we want to mix things up. Dominguez even played there last season, didn't he, in that kind of strange sort of semi-winger right-sided role. So it's not like we'll now be short for wing options or even for number 10, you know, anything behind that line. So I think there was always someone at risk in the forward setup that we've got of missing out, because you just need, obviously, the bodies elsewhere, because, you know, there's a lot of flexibility in our front line, whereas there's obviously less flexibility when it comes to midfield. You've got 2 spots and you need them to be fully fit because they have literally got to cover the whole pitch and all that sort of stuff. And you don't want to be swapping midfielders in games and things, you know, as often. So you want to be putting out a couple of players who are ready to go, I think. So you want more options to start with. So it's not a massive surprise. I mean, where I am with Hutchinson, though, overall, is that I think we probably did overpay. I think it was a little bit of a panic buy to try and quiet down the upset in terms of, you know, not getting much recruitment done and it getting literally 2 or 3 days before the season starts and all that. So I think the fee is misguiding in that respect. I think he was an option that we just thought, oh, right, we can get him done quickly, so we'll do that. I don't think, and this is personal opinion, but I don't think he was a long-term target so much for us that we eventually got hold of. I think it was a little bit of a rush signing, and then if the manager doesn't fancy him, I think you see obviously the outcome of that is you end up in a bit of a situation like this, where it causes even more questions and unrest and potentially, you know, obviously more fans to question whether Nuno's doing it on purpose. I don't think that's the case. I just think he's not necessarily a player that Nuno would have picked if he was choosing his ideal signings, and there's enough cover behind that.
I know that you've been quite vocal, Dan, about your view on the whole casting and how was that really a reason why we bought players in when we did, or was it just a slow market? Like, is there any justification behind us waiting to sign players and so on? And I know we've had that debate, and I'm not asking you to kind of get into it now, but with Amari Hutchinson, I'm just going to stick with you for the moment, Dan. I'll bring Paul in a second. With Amari Hutchinson, is it likely that he was attracted to the club with a conversation that said, "Look, come and join Forest. You know, we've got European football. Europa League is there for you to come and display your talents. You've had a great summer with the European Championships for England. You know, Forest is now a stage for you to come and play." It feels to me like that would probably have been part of the conversation and part of the reason why he would have wanted to join the club. Do you not think?
Maybe. I mean, my suspicion is that there were other driving factors in bringing Amari Hutchinson to Nottingham Forest, to be honest, you know, that aren't necessarily football related. When he did his first interview, he didn't look massively happy to be here. He was a pretty subdued interview and all that, but that might just be his personality. We don't know him that well. Like I say, I think it was a convenient deal for us to kind of get a body in an area that we needed. He was available. He wasn't playing for Ipswich. It was an easy deal to get done, and it was a deal that we've already got links to and connections to and all that. So I just suppose his choice was either playing in the Championship for another season or trying to compete in this squad, wasn't it? So from his point of view, he's still got a very good opportunity to put himself on the stage of the Premier League properly, get more of an impact than he did last time, even if he's competing for minutes and obviously the cup games and all that. So he's still got plenty of football to go at. It just doesn't look good for me from a strategy point of view, does it? If your strategy was to have this plan all summer and then wait for the CAS decision and all that, to then buy a player that your manager doesn't actually fancy enough is not a good strategy in terms of the outcome. Yes, there might have been other plans and other ideas, but the actual outcome doesn't look good, does it, if you look at it backwards?
I guess the question, Paul, and not just the question, there's a few questions, is that people are asking is, well, whose signing was he? Was he an Eddie signing? Did Nuno really want him in the first place? And if it was an Eddie signing and a club signing, is this Nuno's way of sticking two fingers up at Eddie at the moment, where there's all that conflict and saying, well, you bought in a player that I didn't particularly want. I'm not including him in my European squad. So there we go. And I guess I'm going to add on another question to that as well. I'm going to give you lots to kind of get your teeth into here, Paul. Who picks this Europa squad? I mean, does it fall solely on the shoulders of Nuno? I mean, we perhaps don't know the full answer to that, but you'd expect it probably would be his final say, wouldn't you?
You'd think that he would be the driving force behind it. You'd think there's probably consultation going on with his own coaching staff about what they need and what they see are the obstacles ahead. Obviously, I don't know enough about the opposition that we're playing, but there may be some thought into who we're playing against and what kind of systems we might want to play in certain matches. I don't know how much research they would have done on the oppositions that we've got lined up. But yeah, you think Nuno's the driving force behind the squad. You'd probably like to think that it's been passed around other people as well. I don't want to suggest that Marinakis has got any sort of sway over it, but he'd like to be informed, I'd imagine, of what's going on, and possibly Eddie as well. So you'd think it was an element of collaboration, but probably 80-90% driven by Nuno. So yeah, look, I think in terms of just pick up on the comment there about him not fancying Hutchinson, I think it's far too early to tell. I know the optics suggest that, right? And I think the way of looking at the Hutchinson omission, you could look at it two ways. From a point of view of leaving out your record signing, it's an obvious headline, right? But actually, when you delve a bit deeper, Amari Hutchinson is probably, I don't know, he's certainly not the first or second choice winger. He's arguably not the third choice winger now Backwar's come in. So he's kind of competing with Backwood for third/fourth choice winger status at the moment. So in that context, and as Dan said, somebody within the forward line squad had to miss out. Now, if I'm kind of looking at it objectively, you're probably saying, well, actually, maybe it's either Hutchinson or possibly Igor Jesus, for example, because you've got three strikers and you maybe one light in some of the other positions. But as Dan said, Jesus, Callum Wendo could do a job out wide as well. So as can McAtee. So from a footballing perspective and taking the fee out of it, it kind of, I wouldn't say it makes sense, but it's understandable because somebody's got to miss out, and it might be just a case of theoretically you spin a roulette wheel and you've got to land on somebody. The fee thing, I mean, the fee is obviously not determined by the player. It's not arguably not determined by the club. It's determined by the market, really. So, obviously the club didn't have to pay it if they didn't want to, and they felt, obviously somebody or collectively they felt that it was worth doing that fee. But I think that's it's more driven by the market than by anything else. And I think, and I saw somebody saying earlier on, you've got to consider Ipswich's position in all this in terms of if Forest didn't buy him for that money, if he was going to be sold, somebody would have had to pay that much money anyway, because A, the fee that they paid for him in the first place, B, the sell-on clause that they would have had to Chelsea. So, in order for them to make a profit, there needed to be a certain threshold that was hit. And that's not necessarily the case with some other. So, for example, McAtee, there's no sell-on fee for Man City to pay to anybody else for McAtee, whereas for Ipswich there was to pay to Chelsea. So you've got to kind of factor that into it as well, and that that's possibly why the fee was where it was. But yeah, look, I almost forgot your question now. But in terms of is this Nuno sticking two fingers up? I don't necessarily see it that way. I think had there not been this background circus noise going on for the last week or two, I think we wouldn't be giving it quite as much credence as we are because of the the Edu sort of supposed link and all that sort of stuff. If none of that had came out and Hutchinson was left out, we might have gone, oh, yeah, that's an interesting one, but kind of see the rationale behind it and you move on. So a lot of the noise or the additional noise around it, leaving out your most expensive player, is definitely down to the other stuff that's been going on for the last week or two.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. The last 2 or 3 weeks of off-field drama that Forest seem to consistently have has certainly meant that this Europa squad reveal has caused more of a friction and eruption than perhaps it would have done. I guess I've put the squad back up. I know I've got it going across the bottom, but just so we can see it positionally, just to kind of what you guys are both saying, you're right. Someone had to miss out in that front set. But I guess I'm going to bring Nico Dominguez into the conversation now, because I know that in the comments there's one or two saying that they cannot fathom how, and Pat Brett, there you go, you can't justify including Dominguez in any way, shape or form. I mean, Dominguez is in the squad, and I was having a conversation with a few people on X last night trying to say, look, maybe we have to understand that Dominguez is much, much closer to fitness than any of us realise. And after the international break, he's going to be back, getting it reintegrated. He perhaps won't be fit and available for Betis, but he can't surely be that far off. I cannot imagine that Dominguez would be in that squad if he is still really crook. But you could certainly understand that if Dominguez was left out and Hutchinson was in, I can't imagine there'd be a single complaint. Everyone would say, well, look, Dominguez is obviously injured. And so therefore he's the obvious name in that kind of midfield area that people would have been expecting to be left out. So I think that's possibly added to a little bit more of the uproar that Dominguez is in and Hutchinson is out. And then, of course, we have to bring in Alexander Zinchenko into the conversation. And this was the real head scratcher for me personally, because I kind of felt, and you know, take you back to Monday when, for those that were watching, the breaking news came in and it was a real buzz to be able to get that breaking news on the podcast. And it was such a moment. I thought, wow, I think we've really pulled off a really decent, experienced fullback to come in and cover. And he's bringing Champions League experience. I mean, it's an obvious signing that's going to bring experience in. And I'm not saying that Alexander Zinchenko is the best fullback in the world, but he does have pedigree. I stand by the comment I made that you don't play at Man City and Arsenal without being a good player. And he made an impact when he went to Arsenal as well. And over time, you know, that slowly phased out. But he is still a really good player. So, Danscape, I'm coming back to you. Is part of the conversation around Hutchinson being left out fueled because Dominguez is in? And are you any clearer along in the last 12, 14 hours or so as to why Zinchenko hasn't been included?
I don't think Hutchinson and Dominguez and Zinchenko are all linked. I think the Hutchinson one is a standalone decision for the top half of the pitch. But I can see why there is a bit of confusion, frustration about Dominguez or Zinchenko, because it does appear that effectively with Zinchenko, the reason he's not included is because we don't think he's ready. You know, maybe he's not fit. Maybe we don't know if he's fit. Maybe it was just too last minute to get him in to have the confidence to put him into this squad, because once you're in the squad, you're in the squad till the end of January, basically. So maybe that was part of it. And then with Dominguez, though, that kind of flips the other way because we know he's injured. So why would you include him when we know he's injured? But what we don't know is when he's due back. And I suppose if you think back to last season, at this point last season, Danilo had just snapped his ankle in half. And he still came back in January, even through all that kind of extent of injury. And if you look at Sangare, he did his hamstring and he still came back at some point in January to have fitness. So Dominguez is a lot further along, obviously, than those two guys were at this point last season. And they came back in January. So you've got to assume he's closer than the very end of this league process in the Europa League. You've got to assume he's going to be back in November, December time, and he can contribute to, say, half of the games that are in this. And we need the midfield options for me. I know we've got McAtee who can also drop into that midfield area as well. But I just think, given Sangare's history on injuries, we could do with that body in midfield. And one thing I would say with Dominguez as well is, when you look at the rules, you can't, when you get to the end of the league phase, you can't just swap in and out as many players as you want. You are limited to 3. You can make the 3 additions to your squad, and 3 have to go out, so that you're still at the same limit, the same number overall in that A list. So if we don't register Dominguez now, you have to register him then, and you're taking up one of your options to swap things around. So if you know for sure that he's going to be a big part of your squad in the knockout phases and for the back end of the group, it starts to make a bit more sense to just put him in, even though you know he's going to miss the first few games. It still doesn't explain, obviously, the Zinchenko omission, but I suppose if you say Dominguez is in, the question then becomes, well, who would you leave out to fit Zinchenko into this squad? And when you look at it, it's not an easy decision, that. So we have got fullbacks that can cover both sides. We have got Morata, who can play left back. We've potentially got other options we could try at wing back if we went to back 3. This is another one of those very tough decisions that's had to be made. And I think if we had got a left back in earlier in the window, you'd have seen an extra left back in this squad, probably potentially instead of Morata. But because it's all last minute and because it's all late, you're sort of going with the safer option.
So I think what you're saying, and I'm agreeing with you completely, is that understanding the makeup of the squad and the rules and how it has to operate has to come into the thinking. And so those that manage the team, Nuno and his staff, those that manage the club, Edu and Marinakis, you have to completely imagine that they know the ins and outs of all these rules. And so therefore that governs their thinking. So we as fans only get a snapshot really as to, and then we start speculating. And there's so much speculation going on. And some people are saying it's very, very clear to me that, and it's blindingly obvious. And if you can't see it, I can't help you. It's blindingly obvious to me that Nuno is playing games and he's trying to get the sack and all that kind of stuff. And I'll be honest with you, I just don't subscribe to that at all. I'm of the opinion that he will be in charge for Arsenal. I think that if a change was going to be made, it would have been made before that Europa squad was announced, because the manager will, in my opinion, have the final say. There will be conversations with the hierarchy, but ultimately, when you start to piece together the ins and the outs of it, and who's in and who's out, Dan, you make a really good case there for Dominguez, and really point out brilliantly that, actually putting him in now, whilst he might not be instantly fit, we've got plenty of cover in the midfield area, and having him in the squad is really important for when we get through to the knockout stages. And you've put together a really good map of kind of the depth we have in terms of player positions. I'm going to put that up in a moment, but I want to come to Paul on Zinchenko, because you've picked up a theory or a bit of information from UEFA as to possibly why Alexander Zinchenko hasn't been included.
Yeah, and it's I guess it's me trying to seek out a plausible explanation as to why, and it may be that I'm putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5. So there's no hard concrete evidence to suggest what I'm about to say is correct. But if you think back to the circumstances of his signing, we had the Javi Galen move that looked like he was going to go ahead with Atletico Madrid, and he'd done his medical and all the rest of it, and we were going to submit paperwork, and then all of a sudden that fell through, and in it seemed like the last half an hour of the window, Zinchenko suddenly cropped up as an option, and the deal sheet was submitted, and he was obviously registered and signed. And my initial thought was, crikey, well, surely we must have taken a punt on his fitness, because we wouldn't have had time to do a medical. And there was no report of him having a medical anywhere. And it may have been that the deal was subject to him passing a medical. I don't know. That might have been a clause within Arsenal that, if he didn't pass a medical, we could cancel the loan. Who knows? I don't know about that. But it definitely felt that there was limited time to perform a medical for Zinchenko before we signed him, which was on the 1st of September. Now, the squad list for Europa had to be submitted by midnight on the 2nd, so effectively just a little over 24 hours after the window closed, during which time Zinchenko's flying out to be with the Ukraine squad for wherever they're playing. I don't know where they're playing, but he's obviously got an international call-up for them. So again, he's not necessarily around, be it in Nottingham or London or wherever else, to undergo a full medical for Forest. Now, I'm sure there would be that they would have checked his fitness per se. He's not got any major injuries, but and the fact that he's been called up for the Ukraine squad suggests that he is fit in that sense. But there's an article within the UEFA regulation, which I guess is where I'm driving to at this, which Dan pulled out, and I think Raf had found it, and between us we sort of discovered it, that in order to be registered in the Europa League squad, each player has to have had a certain number of medical tests confirmed and signed by the club doctor. Now, again, like I say, he will have been doing whatever pre-season with Arsenal and whatever fitness test and all that kind of stuff. But the Arsenal club doctor is not the Forest club doctor, right? So if you add all that together, if he's signed very quickly, hasn't had a medical with us fully, and therefore the club doctor said, well, I can't, medical sort of protocol, I can't sign him off to be in the Europa League squad because he hasn't undergone the necessary procedures, then that might be the reason why he's not included and why we've had to exclude him, because he's not gone through the full medical protocol. So I don't know that. As I said, that's me seeking a plausible explanation because it seems so odd, given his experience and given the apparent lack of fullback cover that he's not in the squad. So yeah, whether that's true or not, I guess we'll find out over in the fullness of time.
And sticking with you, Paul, then, so take that aside. Zinchenko hasn't been included. Do you feel we've got adequate cover at the back in those fullback areas? I mean, how surprised were you that Zinchenko was left out? Let's say, for example, that it's nothing to do with the medical. Let's say that isn't the case, and it was purely just a tactical decision. Can you see that or not?
I find it surprising, more surprising than the Hutchinson one, I must admit. The caveat, I guess, I suppose, to all of this is and somebody said it in the comments, we're obviously it sounds like we're going to take this competition very seriously. We obviously want to take the Premier League very seriously as well. And if you look at the fixtures that we've got, and take a step back a second, we've got 3 home games against Midtjylland, Malmo and Ferencvaros, and we've got away trips to the likes of Graz and Utrecht. Now, you'd think that within our squad, whether Zinchenko's in it or not, whether Hutchinson's in it or not, we should have enough quality with what's there to get positive results in 5 or 6 of those games. I mean, yes, that's Europe. It's a different kettle of fish. We've seen, just use the Crystal Palace example. Everyone thought they were going to, easily beat Fredrikstad. It was a bit of a struggle, but they got there. So by no means is it going to be easy. But by the same token, we should have enough to get through the fixtures that we've got with the players that we've got. So I think that's, and again, I don't want to, it's not me being complacent. I don't want to dumb down the quality of the opposition, but we should have enough within the squad. Zinchenko, no Zinchenko, Hutchinson, no Hutchinson, to get some positive results. So I think that's an element of it. I think just on the Zinchenko thing, in terms of if he was included, who else would have been excluded? And obviously we've talked about Dominguez and the whys and wherefores. I appreciate everything Dan's saying, but I'm still of the opinion that if you've got a player who is going to be fit for 8 games versus one that might be fit for 4 games, you pick the player that's likely to be fit for 8 games, and you deal with getting the other one in later on, because Zinchenko can play a holding midfield role as well. We know that. So for me, if it purely came down to footballing perspective, I would have picked Zinchenko over Dominguez, unless Dominguez is back within the next couple of weeks. The other thing is obviously the 2 centre backs, or the Bolly and Morato inclusion, because there was some talk about Morato maybe being off somewhere, but the fact that he's in that squad makes you feel like he's not going anywhere. He is the only other left-footed centre back that we've got aside from Murillo, so that kind of makes sense for him to be in the squad. And if you look at the fixtures, there's one in particular I'm looking at, Malmo. Later on we've got Malmo, and that's sandwiched in a week between. We go to Anfield on the Sunday before. We've got Brighton at the City Ground on the Saturday or Sunday after. Now that's a kind of fixture, and that's the 6th game I think in the or 5th or 6th game in the group stage. If we've had a good start, and if Malmo, as you'd expect, to probably languish him somewhere near the bottom, that might be a game where he says, you know what, Murillo, Milinkovic, you guys have a rest and save yourselves for Sunday. And in that scenario, I'd feel much more comfortable with Bolly and Morato stepping in than for example, Zach Abbott and Savona filling that role if you're not having Bolly or Morato in the squad. So there's those sort of things to think about as well. I think we will see rotation, and we will maybe rest some players in the Europa League ahead of big Premier League games. So that's all part of the conversation as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I want to also mention is that we have only kind of got half the information. And what I mean by that is we've got the squad for the Europa League, and so therefore everyone's thinking, well, there's no Omari Hutchinson playing, there's no Zinchenko going to be playing in those games. But as you just touched on, we've got very important Premier League games that follow very closely behind, and it could well be that Nuno has decided Nico is my Europa fullback, and I'm going to play Zinchenko at left back in the Premier League in those games, in those tight games that come back to back. Well, I absolutely want him as my first choice or my backup. So we might even see a switch in the defence with Zinchenko coming into the Premier League side. And we want to take the Premier League as seriously as we did last year and compete on all fronts. So just because Zinchenko's been left out of the Europa, he hasn't been left out of Forest altogether. He's still, I would imagine, going to have lots of Premier League football to play, and the same for Hutchinson. And just on Hutchinson, one thing I wanted to add is on the fee, I think that's a bit of a red herring as well. For me, it was the going rate. It's one of you touched on. If we hadn't paid it, then Ipswich should have got that money from someone else, because that's what the fee was going to be. And just because he so happens to then become our record signing is neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned. He's left in or he's left out of squads on merit. And I guess when you put up the squad as well, and you were talking, I think, Paul, about it might have been maybe Igor Jesus that stepped out for looking at that forward line. One of them had to miss out. So I think Big Arn said it in the comments earlier. If you are leaving Hutchinson in, then who are you taking out? So that's the question. Someone had to miss out, and it happens to be Omari Hutchinson. Tough decisions were always going to be made when you've got this kind of level of squad depth and so on. So, I got myself a little bit worked up last night about Zinchenko. I didn't understand it. I slept on it and wanted to be as balanced as I possibly could be, and thought, you know what, let's think about the players that are in the squad and what kind of quality we've got there. So we're going to grab a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to look at the squad in closer depth, the ones that have been included and the positions that they can cover for the team.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
Indeed, the perfect cheesy mix, Stu Freestone, Cheese Trader. All the details will be in the bio. Okay, a quick dip into the comments before we continue. Steph says, with Nuno already on shaky ground, I can't imagine that he made this lineup without any review by the powers that be. Given Marinakis' ambition, that would really be a firing offence. Yeah, that kind of aligns with what we've been saying. Surely it was a decision that was made with everyone having a bit of input as well. Pat says he's very concerned about overuse of our fullbacks, especially Ola Aina. He's going to be going off to AFCON as well, so that is a concern. Of course, maybe we'll see Savona getting used quite a bit in the Europa League. There is a chance that possibly Nuno would want to switch his formation up and go to a back three. That's something he used at Wolves quite a bit, so we might see Nuno messing around with his formation. And when it comes to the centre backs, I'm with you, Paul. Morato and Bolly were obvious backups to Murillo and Milenkovic. Zach Abbott is a good player, but he is definitely still one for the future and not someone that I want to put under too much pressure. But it does feel like a bit of an odd one if Morato does end up leaving the club. I don't see it happening now. If he's been included, then I just cannot fathom that he's going to be included and then leave in this window. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if he does leave, we can replace him in the squad with another. Is that correct or not?
I don't think so.
Don't think it is.
It's only a goalkeeper that you
Yeah.
can do that with. Yeah.
There was some chatter, wasn't there, about whether that could be the case. I've still not definitively seen it either way, but I think what Dan's right is that it is only a goalkeeper that you can change once you've named it, which again, makes it even more likely that he's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. Okay, Danscape, you came up with a nice chart that shows all of our players within the squad and the positions that they can cover. So it kind of offers a look at the kind of depth that we do indeed have if we need it. So look, there's a lot there to kind of read out. So for example, I'm going to give a few examples for those that aren't watching. On the right wing, right flank, you've got options there that include Dan Ndoye, Bakwa, Hudson-Odoi, McAtee can float out there, Kali Muendo can go there, Dominguez has played there as well in the Premier League. So there's 6 players there already that can operate in that position. Similarly, at right centre back, you've put down Milenkovic, Morato, Bolly, Savona, Abbott. At right back or right wing back, you've got Aina, Savona, Williams, Bakwa, Abbott. There's lots of depth, I guess you could say, in terms of players that can fill into those kind of roles. So talk to us about the left back then. You put Williams, obviously Ola, Aina and Morato there as well. It doesn't feel quite as empty, I guess, with Zinchenko not being in the squad. When you look at it like that, it doesn't really feel as much of an issue.
Well, yeah, but it is also the smallest box on the chart, isn't it? So it kind of is and it isn't.
You only need one. You don't need 3. You only need one.
Look, for me, this is like, when you go on holiday and you're trying to work out how many pairs of underwear to pack, and you're like, right, should I take a few extra because some disaster's going to happen? Like, are we actually going to be in a position where Williams and Aina are both injured at the same time, or Aina's away at AFCON?
Don't say it out loud, Dan. Don't say it out loud.
There's touch word, but you have to get to a certain bad place before it becomes a reality. And even when you get to that reality, look, Morato does not appeal to me to play left back. Obviously, Murillo potentially could play there if you really wanted to mix things up, but I don't know whether Bakwa could do a job there. He's obviously left-footed and he has played a defensive role before. So there's bits we just don't know about these players because we haven't seen them play. But there's enough cover in most other areas. That is the one area that, yes, it looks a bit short. But again, I come back to the point that if you took him out, if you took someone else out to put Zinchenko in there, who else would you take out of that? Because you're then going to be short potentially in midfield for me. I know we've got bodies there, and I know Gibbs White can drop in and all that. So it's just, it literally is what it is, isn't it? We're short because we can only name the 22 players, and there's just that one position that doesn't suit. And I suppose going back to some of the comments in the chat about, we are going to have a bit of a risk with fullbacks playing a lot of games. But for me, this is where I'm coming from with the strategy of the transfer window. They fullback position should have been absolute top of the list. And I know we're trying to find backups, and it's not easy to necessarily do that. But we tried quite a few. We got close with a few. And I suppose that's where I'm saying, why did we spend such a big fee on Hutchinson to then sign Bakwa as well for also a big fee, who's now going to sort of jump ahead of him, and not get those fullbacks in earlier, so that actually it was an easy decision what to put in this squad. It would have been easy if we'd signed whoever it was, Zinchenko or somebody, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and Savona, who is quite a risky option. Let's face it. He's young and he's not necessarily done a great deal as well as the kind of the main right back sort of option. I can still see why Nuno would be upset with the way we've done business for those fullback roles, because yes, I think there is a big risk of overplaying Aina and Williams, but we sort of are where we are now. So the squad that's gone in for this competition just reflects what obviously is fairly well covered, a lot of versatility. McAtee in particular, potentially covers a lot of positions in this squad, and you can see why he's chosen over Hutchinson, for example. So I think, there's always going to be one or two debates, wasn't there, I think, and we have covered a lot of ground now.
So I touched on it before, and Brucey asks in the comments, is Nuno setting up for a back 3 for Europa, Paul? The new Italian fullback can play right-sided centre-back as well, as can Morato. What are your thoughts and view on that?
Could be, yeah. The honest answer is I don't know. But like I said earlier, there may be, you'd like to think that they've got a knowledge of some of the other teams we're playing against. I guess probably the obvious two would be Betis and Porto, and you'd probably quite easy to have a plan sort of lined up for how you would tackle those two teams, given probably that you know quite a bit more about them than the others. So yeah, maybe we will see a back three. I don't know. I mean, obviously Nuno historically used that a lot. Used it with Wolves. I think we all thought when he first came to Forest we'd see it a lot more than we have. So we just don't know. I mean, just on the fullback thing. Sorry, just quickly, and you mentioned Baina going to AFCON. Just to point out, he doesn't actually miss any Europa games whilst he's at AFCON. He pretty much goes immediately after the Utrecht game and comes back immediately before the Braga game, assuming he's there for the full duration and Nigeria go deep. So he's going to be playing a hell of a lot of football.
A lot of fatigue, though.
Yeah, for someone who already looks knackered when as it is. So he is a real, I guess, question mark in terms of whether he's going to be able to handle it. And I'm pretty sure, he's going to have a fair bit of opportunity to rest him, which then, as you say, maybe does put the spotlight on the likes of Savona, or even in league games, switch Williams to right back, and as you said, Zinchenko plays left back. That might be the way he manages the fullback thing in the league games and rests Aina. So I think we just got to wait and see. But come back to your back three question, could absolutely be a possibility. Yeah.
Okay. I think looking at that squad depth or positional depth, I think it is, isn't it? It's positional depth. As much as I'm happy with who's in, because I want to be happy, I still think that we could have afforded to leave probably Dominguez out for Zinchenko. I mean, I've been trying to make a case for Dominguez because I'm a big Dominguez fan. I think everyone knows that. And I thought last season he was really, really important for us. And he got a lot of game time because he is a really good player. And maybe Nuno sees that and says, look, I absolutely want to have Nicolas Dominguez in my squad because he's going to be valuable and I'm going to be playing him. But there are other rumours and whispers that I'm hearing that actually Dominguez is still hobbling around and he's actually nowhere near fitness. And if that's to be believed, then it is a head scratcher that he's in the squad ahead of Zinchenko, because in that DCM position, you'd have Sangare, Louise, and Yates. You'd have Anderson, who can easily play in that role as well. So there's, in my eyes, there's plenty of cover there. So, I'm not going to get too worked up on it. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to go with it and trust in Nuno and trust in the management team that the squad they picked is the correct one. And I believe that when the Premier League games come into play, Zinchenko is going to get a lot of game time. Dominguez, we have to wait and see on his fitness and so on. But, it is exciting for us fans. We are going into the Europa League and the game against Sevilla is just a few weeks away. So lots of you I know have booked flights to go out there, even without tickets, to kind of be in the town and the city and to be close to the action and get in the bars and so on. And I absolutely wish that I could be joining you. Believe you me. But there we are. So the squad has been announced. Paul, I know that you might not have the data to hand, but as it stands, and I should probably have asked you this before we came on, but as it stands with the games that are set on the calendar, the Europa games, alongside the Swansea game that's coming up and alongside the Premier League games, are you able to remember what kind of turnaround that gives us? Because I know that you've been really focused since we've been playing well last season, especially on rest time and game time and recovery time, I think I'm trying to say. Yeah. So I've kind of sprung it on you. Can you just kind of let us have that again on what kind of recovery time this squad are going to have?
I do indeed. Right. So what I've got that data, all those details, up until the Fulham game, which is on the 20th of December. Because obviously post that you've got Christmas schedules, and which is going to be TV's going to play around with that, and you've got cup games potentially. You've then got obviously how far we get in Europa. So I've done up until the 20th of December, where pretty much the fixtures are set in stone. So that is for us. If you add in, so this is league games wise, that's 17 league games plus the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Europa League games and one EFL Cup, minimum of one EFL Cup game. So that's 19 games. So no, sorry, what's that? 6. I'm getting myself confused now. I've got 2 more Europa games. So yeah, but about 20 odd games basically in that period. And we have got an average. So our total recovery time up until that Fulham game is 92 days recovery, right? Which in between the Premier League games, in between each game, that is an average of a game every 5.75 days. Right, that's a Premier League game. A game every 5.75 days. Our opposition has a game every 6.7 games. 6.7 days, sorry. So we've basically got a day less recovery for every game for the first 16, 17 Premier League games that we're playing, which might not sound a lot, but when you factor in the fact that there's travel involved and there's there's all that sort of thing to factor in. I mean, if you think about I'll use the Spurs game, which is on the 14th of December. Just pick that as one example, because you might say, well, actually, Spurs are going to be in European competition as well, and they are. So we've got Spurs at home on the 14th of December. After going to Utrecht away on the Thursday night. And it's not a massive journey, granted, but it still takes a day or best half part of a day to get back and travel. So game finishes on Thursday night, travel back on the Friday. You would think probably not going to be training until the Saturday. The game's on the Sunday. Spurs have got a Champions League game on the Tuesday at home. So they'll be back in training on Wednesday ahead of that game against Forest on the Sunday, whereas we're not in training until late Friday or even the Saturday. So that just gives you an example of the impact that has. Just that's just one example, but there's numerous others as well that is going to have take its toll, and which is why when we're talking about how do we fit all the players into the squad, how do we get them more minutes, we're going to have to rotate players during that period and beyond. Obviously, if we're successful and we get to the next round of the Europa League, we're going to be having a game possibly every 3.5 days for 3-4 months back to back for a certain part of the season. So everybody's going to get a chance. And if you think back of last season where we did so well. Was when we had a purple patch around Christmas time, where almost in every game where we won 6 in a row and drew against Liverpool and then beat Southampton, those 7 or 8 games, we had almost every game we had more recovery time than our opponents, because they were playing either Europe or EFL Cup semi-finals and likes of Brentford or quarterfinals. They had TV games over Christmas that fell in our favour, that we got scheduled a little bit better than them. So it was all in our favour, and we hardly had any injuries or suspensions as well during that period, probably because we hadn't had the toll of European football, and we got knocked out of the EFL Cup, if you remember, on penalties against Newcastle right at the start of the season. So we just literally had, every week we had a league game, and that was it. And that's the difference this time. We're going to have to juggle all that other stuff, which will take its toll, and which is why the extra bodies in the squad is so important, why we've had to spend the money that we have.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I kind of chucked that on you, and you pulled out those bits for me quite well there, so I appreciate that. In a nutshell, guys, the games are going to come thick and fast. The recovery time is going to be less than our opponents. Yeah, and as Brucey says, never did the maths live. Okay, I want to go to the comments and just kind of dip in. Forest Fan TV, Wolfie's with us. He says, guys, we can flower this up. All we want is clear. It's Edu versus Nuno. Well, yeah, we know that much, because that's really something that's been in the public domain for a while. Will they tidy it up? Will they get it sorted? Apparently there is or has been that meeting with Marinakis taking place last night or into today. So there's a meeting going on. And look, it's not beyond the realms of possibility, Dan, that Nuno is shown the door, or he makes it clear that he's unhappy. And there's talk that similar things were happening at Wolves at the end. He wasn't happy with how things were operating, and so he effectively threw his toys out of his pram and off he went. Whether that happens or not, we can only wait and see. We can sit here and speculate. Well, I think Nuno will stay. Well, I think Nuno will go. And I think it's this and I think it's that. Ultimately, I'll say it again. I can't believe that the club would have released the Europa squad with Nuno involved in that, only for him to not be the manager. Now, an hour in football is a long time, so things can change very, very quickly. And I'll have egg on my face at 5 o'clock when the news breaks that he's been fired and all that kind of stuff. So, what about you? Is he going to be in charge for Arsenal, Dan? That's what I'm trying to get to.
I mean, yeah, if as reported that meeting took place yesterday, then the squad would have already been decided before the meeting, and I think Nuno did hint that they wanted to get the transfer window out of the way before they had the meeting, and who knows whether it's actually that kind of meeting where it's like one specific conversation or whether they've been chatting. Who knows? But look, the Arsenal game is not a great game to have to come back and face after a couple of weeks of speculation, really, because going away to Arsenal. Yeah, exactly. So it's not an easy game. It's one of our toughest games of the season, but it's an opportunity, if we do get something out of that, to obviously prove the togetherness and prove that the players and everything are focused and on board. So it can work both ways. But yeah, you could probably pick another fixture to choose. Where are we at now? I mean, if you were looking at the sentiment of the fans and using the social media sentiment of the fans as a decent barometer, which I'm not sure it entirely is, you would say that after this squad announcement, that the PR for Nuno has gone down a step. There's a little bit more kind of questioning him again. So if you were gauging the fan opinion to make your decision, then as time goes on and as we're sat here on the back of that West Ham game, then it becomes easier and easier to show Nuno the door from a fan reaction point of view, because there's little things that keep happening that people are like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And they're attributing it to Nuno, whether it is or not. Like we said about the squad sign off, I don't think it's down to just Nuno. Most of that squad would have been decided a couple of weeks ago almost, and you're just making those final few decisions or whatever. So yeah, I think it's still very difficult position for him, because people are only now going to get back on board with a couple of good performances in a row. Arsenal, tough game. Burnley after that, absolutely huge game, because anything other than a resounding result against that Burnley side will be seen as a problem for Nuno. So this is where he has brought some pressure on himself.
Richard Spray is in the comments. He's probably just got up. He says, morning, afternoon, like and subscribe as always. Please do. Yes, he's reminding me to ask you to hit the like and subscribe button, folks. He says, sorry for leaving you guys to be provided more informed, salient and opinions. Okay, I'm not quite sure. I think he's trying to say, I think he's basically degrading himself, and you shouldn't do that, Richard, because we love you dearly. He says, great stuff as ever from Greg, Dan, and Paul. Okay, Paul Morley, I'm going to ask you the same question. We're edging towards the end. Where are you on Nuno at Forest for Arsenal? Is he there or not?
I think it looks like he will be. I think I concur with the comment that if that West Ham game was going to be the straw that broke the camel's back, it would have already been. We'd have seen that by now. I think. Like you say, you never say never. You might log off from here, and in 2 hours' time, there might be a statement coming out of the club and a picture of the corner flag that we've become accustomed to over the course of time. So you never say never. I think it feels like he will be in charge for that game. But as Dan said, he's brought a lot of pressure on himself with the way he's conducted himself in recent weeks in the media. And like I said before, there's always another side to it, in that he felt that was his only option, and he felt maybe backed into a corner and he had to do something, and that was his kind of nuclear option, that if I come out and say it, I'm either going to get my way or I'm going to be booted out. And I don't subscribe to the notion that he wants to get sacked. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but yeah, look, I think he will be in charge for the Arsenal game, and again, I hope that what you hope from that game is a good performance more than anything. I think if we go there and we get beaten, 1 or 2-0 or whatever, and we play well and compete, then I don't think many people will grumble too much, because it's Arsenal, and they are a quality side, and lots of teams will go there and get beat this season. So I think more than anything, looking at the man and the performance in that game to give a clue as to whether the players are still on board and all the rest of it, and I'm sure that will be a factor in if there is any decisions made in the weeks after that, or the days after that. Like Dan said, Burnley is a really big moment. I think if he gets through the Arsenal game, if we end up losing 6-0 at Arsenal, then writing maybe on the wall, and that might be it. But if we come away from Arsenal, points or not, but a decent performance, then real big focus on the Burnley game, I think, as to what happens with Nuno. I hope he stays. I hope they find a way through it. I've said this before, so again, I think he's got enough credit in the bank. But I think, as I'm trying to think who it was Adam Summerton saying yesterday on Forest Focus, is that is Nuno, with all this stuff that's happened, is he in the same headspace? Is he the same person that he was even 12 months ago? Is he approaching it in the same way? Has he got the same energy for it? How much life has this sort of sucked out of him? Because it's all well and good saying, "Hey, we want Nuno. He's done a great job." You know, is this the same Nuno as last year? Question mark. I'm not sure at the minute whether it exactly is or not. So we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Out of time, guys. Thanks ever so much for the chat. One more time, I will ask you to like and subscribe. We are on X, we are on TikTok and Facebook, Instagram, the usual places. So please do give us a follow, give us a like, and so on. We are posting out on X and onto YouTube at the moment videos from all the team. We've had one from Raf, the random pundit, and one from Brucey so far, as we give you our view on the 13 new signings. Danscapes will be coming up soon. He's looking at Cuibano, who was actually exited and gone back to Brazil. Although the club haven't even announced that, which I find kind of strange. Kind of find it strange that they announce his signing and then at least they can say, you know, we send Cuibano back to Botafogo for the rest of the season. We wish him well. See you in January. There's been no kind of mention of that whatsoever, which I find a bit baffling. And I totally missed the David Carmo going out to, I think it's Real Oviedo. So whether that was announced or not, I don't know. But I missed that completely. But it's on the website, so he's out the door. Okay, right. Danscape, Paul Morley, you both legends. Thank you so much for your time. I'll be back on Saturday with Richard Spray and with Danscape. We're going to be looking at the fullback area. We're going to do a stats special on the fullback, and Dan's got loads of charts to throw at us. So Richard and I and Dan will be back on Saturday for that. As ever, Colombo, one more thing, is itching to get back in again, Paul Morley.
I was just going to say on the whole Europa League squad, don't forget, you know, as Dan said, we can change it up in January. So all this conjecture about Zinchenko and Hutchinson, it may well be that come the final in May, Zinchenko bursting down the left, Robertson-esque, crosses it in, Hutchinson nips in at the back post from the right wing, scores the winning goal in the Europa League final. So, and we're all wondering what we're talking about. So that could still happen.
And you know what? The last time you said something like that was when we were getting our knickers in a twist about pre-season and no goals being scored and it all being a disaster. And Paul Morley said, you know what? On the first game of the season, when we end up beating Brentford 3 or 4-0, we look back on this and we'll all wonder what the fuss was about. And that's exactly what happened. So the soothsayer has said it here and he's saying it loud and proud. Zinchenko crossing for Amari Hutchinson in the Europa League final, Forest to win 1-0. See you soon.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on top.